My name is Ross Gassaway.
Rossmobile.
I fly a Nitro 200 by Air Conception, and I've got a couple of wings. My primary one right now is a Scirocco 219, but I've also flown a Spider 24 for a couple hundred hours. And it's been a good progression up to that wing. It's super stable and pretty fast, so I like it. After corporate life, I actually stopped for a while. I moved to Florida and I owned a dive shop for 5 years. So I actually taught diving in Naples, Florida, and certified over 500 people in the time I had that shop there. So I love teaching. It's something I have a passion for, and it's fun to impart that to somebody else. I'm finding that same thing here at Aviator now, just helping out here and helping to teach new people how to fly. A typical flight for me is take off, gain some altitude, and in where I normally fly in North Carolina, there's lots of trees, so the first thing you do is you take off, you get to a couple thousand feet, get over all the trees, go find some of our farms, and then do, from that altitude, do acro down into a field. I'm getting decent at wing overs and all the basic stuff. I haven't gotten to anything fancy, but I like to call my flying like half cross country, half acro. I like to look around. I love maps. I love to look at stuff. I love to fly over new areas and get 30 or 40 miles in. So what a lot of people call a cross country is kind of a normal flight for me. I like hour and a half flights and check out different areas. If you can find a balloon, that's great. That's like the holy grail, is to find a balloon that's flying around and go circle the balloon a few times. It's hard to think of an exact best flight because a number of them have been pretty awesome since I've been traveling the country. The most recent one has been flying with Tucker Gott over the Hoover Dam. The two of us took off about 7 miles away from the dam, had to fly over some pretty rough terrain. When we got to the dam, you had to look down into a chasm in front of the dam and try to find small outs if you had an engine issue. Flying around the dam, we also had power lines, helicopters, a lot of issues around us that we had to watch for, but it was a good flight. It wasn't very long, but it was probably one of my most memorable flights. Paragliding, on the other hand, Costa Rica. I've been down to the Aviator's location called Costa, and hung out with Gigi for a week there, and it was a great time because if the wind was still, we would jump on the motors and do cross countries or hit the beach. If the wind was picking up, we would grab the paragliders, run up the mountain, and paraglide in different places. I actually learned to fly free flight down there. Gigi is a fairly new paramotor instructor, but he's an amazing paragliding instructor. So he's been doing that for a long time. He's a great person to learn from. They have kind of a bunny hill location behind the condominiums that they use for headquarters. That's like 5 minutes from the condo. And then kind of from my graduation, we went about an hour and a half south to this mountain with 2,000-foot drop. Had to fly, you could fly there all day long. It was perfect beach weather, wind coming up that mountain. You actually had to concentrate to come back down again. You could fly all day long. And the sketchiest part of that, though, and the puckering part, I guess, is from the mountaintop to the beach was 3 miles away with no outs in between. And the first time I left the mountain to go there was had to make sure that I had enough altitude and get to the beach. But it was actually, I barely lost any altitude. It was very eye-opening how far you can go with the paraglider. Worst flight I've ever had. Well, I don't know if I call it the worst flight because they're all fun, but probably the scariest flight I've ever done was one in North Carolina. It was an evening flight in the summertime, and generally in the summer you get pop-up clouds everywhere. Pretty much every day looks the same. Some days it might rain, some days it's clear. But I went out to my little airport. It's W-17 in Knightdale, North Carolina. And was hanging out with some of the old guys down there, and we were watching the sky to see if we wanted to fly. It looked fine. The wind was dying down. The old guys sitting around a campfire there were telling me to go up and entertain them. So I took off and did a couple wingovers for them and looked out, and it was cloudy, but it was fine. So I decided to take a little evening flight away from the airport. And I took off, and I was flying directly away from the airport and about a mile or two, and looked out and saw a rainbow in front of me. I thought, hey, that's really pretty, but then there shouldn't be a rainbow out right now. And I turned around and looked behind me, and there was a pop-up storm the other direction, about 2 miles from the airport. And I decided to come down and race the storm back toward my small airport. So, and I was probably 2 miles away, 2,000 feet up. So do some big ears and some wingovers to come down and get out of any storm front that was coming up, and race back to the airport pretty low. And I was getting bumped around quite a bit, and the storm was getting closer, and I ended up landing right in front of an open hangar door and letting my wing fall into the hangar on top of this guy's plane that I knew out there. And the moment I jumped into there, the rain opened up and poured down on me. By the time I was able to get my van in there to pick up my gear, it was just sheeting rain coming out. So it was pretty close. So you never know when storms are going to pop up, even if it looks like it's a normal day. So that was probably my scariest flight. The most scenic flight. There's been a number of good spots. I mean, Moab is beautiful, and we flew through Valley of Fire, but probably the most beautiful spot is, there was a moonshiners fly-in last year up in Tennessee. It's in the mountains of Tennessee. And one evening we actually did about a 25-mile cross country around some of the mountain passes. So there's about 5 of us, took off and went about 5 miles north toward a lake and puttered around that for a little bit. And then we chose a ridge over from where we started off and flew back, and it was probably the most green place I've ever seen in my life. All it was little farms spotting here and there through the valley, green trees, green grass, animals, cows, sheep everywhere. It was probably one of the most amazing flights ever. As the sun started going down, all the clouds above were turning orange and pinks and all that. It was an amazing flight. So about halfway through that, we actually, as we came back around, we found a quarry that was fun to go fly in, and we all chased each other through the quarry. And then heading back from the quarry, we found a golf course which was closed down for the evening. So no golfers out there, so we all dropped down, looked for wires, and ran through the golf course 10, 15 feet off the ground, through all the trees. It was a pretty magical night. So 6 of us did the loop around and came back, and I think we got 25 miles in that day. Usually I pre-flight my motor. I do a big pre-flight probably once every other week. Go through every single nut, bolt, tighten everything down, check everything. And before every flight, I'll do a minor pre-flight, check all the major stuff. Swing arms are tight, the netting is tight, all the nothing vibrating, shaking, having problems with the muffler. Do the basic pre-flight before that, and then usually I'll try to pre-flight a little right after I fly too. So you get a little bit of your eyes right after you fly, and then a little bit right before you fly the next time. My top 5 spots so far have been Moab, Utah. Is amazing. The color out there. Everybody has to fly the Corona Arch. It's definitely a bucket list item. You have to go, and that's a fun place to fly because it's higher altitude. It definitely takes a little bit more running to get in the air to go fly that. And so the Corona Arch. I've flown up in Lake Tahoe, California, Nevada border, and that's beautiful there. Morro Bay, there's a really large rock there. It's one of the big landmarks in the middle of California. It's a really beautiful place to fly. But let's see, I've flown in San Diego. That's a neat area, Mission Bay. There's a couple of places you can fly that are outside the airspace zones there, and a couple islands. I actually went to Mexico for the first time. I've been to Mexico a lot, but I've never driven across the border by myself to Mexico, especially when you're driving a big white van. And it's a beautiful place on the beach, and you can fly 20 miles up and down the beach anywhere you want to go. I actually flew almost down to Ensenada City, which is about 20 miles south, and turned around and came back. That was a beautiful evening flight. After that, I drove toward Las Vegas and ended up doing a flight with Tucker over Valley of Fire, and then the next day over Hoover Dam. And those were amazingly beautiful places to fly. And that's when it started getting really cold, and I decided to drive from California to Florida to wait out the winter. I generally update my Instagram. It's just Ross.Gassaway on Instagram, as well as the YouTube channel I'm starting right now, which is also Ross.Gassaway. Keep it simple. And I'm going to be traveling the country for about a year, and as I travel to new places, I'll be updating those Instagram and YouTube channels. And if you see them in your area, give me a call or a shout on Instagram or on Facebook, and I might be able to come out and fly with you. So let me know.
Heaven knows that I'm born too late for these ghosts that I chase. With these dreams I inflate, painted skies in my brain. Every day I'm causating in space to escape this old world, this old world. Some days I lie wide awake till the sun hits my face, and I fade, elevate from the earth, far away to a place where I'm free from the weight. This old world, this old world. I don't trust anything or anyone.